we are going to go through a lot of the constraints in Sketch. So this is where you make a 2D sketch and then you extrude it or do some manipulation. So the first one we're going to look at is, it's not really a constraint in itself, it's the auto dimension. And I guess sometimes this can help. Basically, you click on it, this comes up, you can select what you want to auto dimension. I think if you don't select anything, it just does everything. And it does dimensions and constraints. You could click these on or off, and then you just hit OK. It gives you what it gives you. So if you look at what it's done, it is probably not what I would have chosen. But for simple things, it can do a good job. And you'll also notice that it didn't totally constrain it. It did lock down the structure's overall size geometry, but you can still move it around, right? So it didn't kind of constrain it to, you know, the location on the thing. So that's, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We're going to delete everything. And then the next one is show constraints. So if you just did a rectangle here, and it kind of shows you what's on each one, right? So you can see, okay? And then this third one up here is your constraint settings. I typically don't fool with these. There's general, inference, and relax mode. Again, I don't really work with those or change them. I probably would suggest as new students and new CAD people not to mess with them. Okay. So that's that. Now let's get into the actual constraints. One constraint is a dimension. So a dimension kind of locks down a side, right? It has said that this segment here will be 5.5. And if you could click on this side to get it, or you could, let's delete that. Let's delete this. Let's delete that. Escape. Okay, we want to get rid of the dimension thing. Let's go over here and delete the dimension. So one way we did it is we selected the segment. The other way you can dimension is by selecting each of the two lines that the segment is attached to, and hit OK. That's kind of, you know, you might not have a segment joining something. So here, let's get rid of, well, let's keep that, but let's say we want to dimension this to the origin. Well, we can go to the y-axis here and select that. And now we have a dimension to the y-axis. And then we could do the same between here and the x-axis. And there we have the entire rectangle locked down, right? And you'll notice at the bottom here, in the bottom right corner, this says fully constrained. It also says fully constrained because it's black, right? If I take off this dimension, you see that this turned blue, and at the bottom here it says that this sketch needs one more dimension or one more degree of freedom to be locked down before it's fully constrained. So when you're getting near the end or when you have a problem, it's good to look at this corner here to see how many degrees of freedom are left. A lot of the errors are that you're over constraining something. So that's kind of one thing. Let's take this other dimension off. Okay, so here we have something that is not fully constrained, right? It's blue all over. And so you might be thinking to yourself, why isn't this fully constrained? And one of the things to look at is just to try and move it, right? So if I kind of grab certain things, I can move this. Let's see. I can move this box, right? And that kind of gives you an idea that what is not locked down, okay? So that is kind of the dimension constraint, okay? Let's kill this and let us just draw two lines. Okay, one line and then another line. Okay, so we have these two lines. Now if we look at the thing, 8 dimensions are needed for what we've constructed so far. Okay. One of the things we can do is we can constrain points. And so if we take this point and this point and constrain them together, now they will always be attached. Those points will, those 2 points will stay together, and that's the constraint, okay? You can also, let's delete this. Delete. Let's add a new line. Okay. We can constrain this point to this line. Now notice when I came over here, I almost selected the midpoint, and you don't want to do that. I want it to be able to move along this line. Okay, so there I've constrained this point to be on this line. So you can kind of move, get bigger, but this point is always collinear with this line. And that's the constrained point, right? And when you hover over something, of course, you get the explanation. Okay, so let's get rid of that constraint. Okay, so now this line can go wherever it wants to go. Let's look at the parallel constraint. So here we have parallel. We select this line, we select that line, and they're parallel now. Okay. So they can be on top of each other, or they can be far apart, but they're going to stay parallel. They're right, the angle between them, you cannot change the angle between them. Okay, so that's parallel. Let's select that and delete the parallel constraint. Let's look at this one, collinear. Okay, so collinear is parallel plus. So we'll select this line, we'll select this line, and now they're collinear. They're parallel, plus they're on the same plane, or same line. So if you take this one, right, they can be separated, but they're always going to be on this line, right? They're always going to stay on this certain path. Okay, so let's delete that. Okay. Bring that over. Okay. Let's look at that's parallel. One that I always kind of get is this one, is equal. Okay, so you have parallel where they're gonna, be parallel to each other. Equal is going to make these the same line. Okay, so instead of having a dimension, you can dimension one, and then the other will always update to the whatever value you had given it. Okay. And then if we go over here, horizontal constraint, if you click on this one, it makes it horizontal. So it's parallel to the x-axis in this case, right? We can also do vertical. Okay. So now this has to stay horizontal. This has to stay vertical. Kind of two very common constraints. Let's delete these. Let's draw two more lines. Another line. Oh, oops. Another line. Okay. Perpendicular. Okay. So perpendicular. Select this line, then select this line, and hit OK. And this line always has to be at a 90-degree angle to this line. So that's a fairly common constraint also. All right. Let's delete everything. Well, let's not. Let's delete the constraint. Okay. Let's move this over here. Symmetric. Okay, so let's click on this one. Let's click on this one. And then let's click on the y-axis. So now these two lines are symmetric in angle. Right? They're not the same length. They're not mirror images, but the angle to this line is kept, and the distance is kept, right? So that's that one. Let's delete that. Let us create an arc. And there we go. Now let's create a line. There. Okay. Tangent. Okay. So let's say select this one and this one. These two have to be tangent. Okay, so they don't look tangent. But what you see when I move them is that, whoop, that's different. Okay, there, just had a little updating. That it is making it tangent to also the non-drawn part of the arc. Okay, so this arc is actually a circle, right? And so this will be tangent to the circle, right? So this invisible part of the, right, this is an arc and it's actually a complete circle, but it's invisible. So it's tangent to this invisible part. If we then take this and say this point and this point are going to be always tangent, you can see now that we have these two curves and this is always going to be smooth, right? There's going to be no angle of difference where these two curves join up to each other, right? Because there's a tangency and there's a constraint here, right? Okay, so I'm not going to go through this one. This one has to do with smooth curves and splines, and we haven't used splines yet. There is also lock, which you could say lock that point down. So that just constrains all degrees of freedom of that point. I don't like using lock very much. It is a quick way if you're having real trouble to totally constrain your sketch, but it's then you don't understand why, you know, what degrees of freedom you're missing. So I'm not a big fan of it. I don't use it myself um, much. Or if I have to get it done, then I go back and fix it later. Okay. So, so that's that one. Delete that. Another one is concentric. Okay, so don't use this too much, but it's kind of good for locking one center point to another. So these two, an ellipse shares a center point, and the circle shares the center point, and it basically locks those two center points on top of each other. Okay. Did equal, we did symmetric, skipping that, parallel, perpendicular. So those are all the constraints. And so we'll stop it there. If you made it through the constraints video, congratulations. Here's some practice. Hopefully you practice through the video doing recreating what I did. But here's some ideas to practice different constraint skills in Autodesk Inventor. So the first is just kind of really simple, create 4 separate lines and then use constraints to form a rectangle out of those 4 lines. We pretty much did that in the video, so it shouldn't be too hard. Then take that rectangle and use the equal constraint to change it to a square. Third, just kind of create some letters in the sketch system, like a P, X, K, B, Z, and extrude them so that they are so that you make sure that you have all your constraints set up properly. And then 4 is something I just pulled off the web, is a sketch with dimensions on it, and you can recreate that. So have fun.